I am the Knight. I am Batman. You guys rock. Bat fans are the best fans.
Welcome to Expo Dallas. My name is Moises Chuyan. I host a few podcasts, including one called Electric Shadow, which I've used audio from Q&As with you in the past on. I've hours of talking with you, but you always have new stories.
Oh no, I gotta think of something fast.
I want to ask you to start off with something I've never started off asking you. You are a hero to so many people in this room. Who were your heroes growing up?
Wow, who are my heroes growing up? That's kind of interesting. There's an interesting thing about acting is that you bring everything you are as a person to what you're doing. So you've heard that phrase, the actor, you are your instrument, like musicians have an instrument, actors have themselves, their being. It's everything you brought with you. And the only thing they can really teach you in acting school is how to get in touch with yourself, how to get through layers of tension and restriction that keep you from getting to your own emotions. Because when you get a script, you want to be able to just immediately go to where the character is. You want your own emotional life to be so rich and so available that you can just go to where the character needs to go. You don't want to have to work on it in rehearsals when you're working on the character. You want to spontaneously just go. And so in acting school, all they can really teach you is how to get more in touch with who you are. And the interesting thing for me is my background, I came from a my father was a raging alcoholic. My mother had some drinking issues. And then my family they all just kind of disintegrated by the time I was 15. And when you're the child of an alcoholic, you grow up really young. You become responsible for, you're putting your parent to bed and stuff like that. And you're kind of running the house. So I moved out when I was 15 and moved in with friends so I could finish up high school, which I did a year early. And then I got a scholarship to go to Juilliard. I got my first job, which was as a mail boy in Manhattan in a commercial mail operation. And I made money to go to Juilliard and got a full scholarship, and I've been supporting myself ever since. So the sort of crumbling of the family forced me to get out on my own, young, and to be resilient on my own. So when I came across Batman, this guy whose family is so destroyed at such an early age, and he has to recreate himself, I related to that. I related to that emotional journey in a lot of ways. So when you ask about heroes that I had when I was young, my childhood was a little different because I had a situation where I was taking care of a lot of people. So I didn't have a lot of heroes, really. I was busy cleaning up a lot of messes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And but it was interesting because I think that there's a great John Lennon line that I use a lot, which is, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And I think that's so true about life. You just never know where it's going to take you. I went to Juilliard to study to be a classical actor. Well, classical theater basically evaporated. You can't make a living in it anymore. The only way you can do that is if you do television or film. So being an exclusively theater actor doesn't exist. So in a way I was training for a field that was evaporating. And then that led to TV, and Broadway led to TV, and TV led to LA, and LA led to voices, and voices led to animation. And you just don't know what's going to lead to what. But it's interesting that when I finally got brought to Batman, there was this emotional journey that this character had gone on that I completely related to from my own emotional journey as a child. And I just went with it. So it's funny how life brings you in certain directions. And I really am such a great believer in education and training yourself. Like I was very aware for years of never having had a classical, a traditional college education. Because actor training school is not like a regular college. So I became very self-motivated about reading, and I read an enormous amount. And I'm very into self-education. And so I really, when people ask me for advice, I always say, get educated, get training, completely inform yourself, because you never know what life is going to bring. Life throws nothing but curveballs. And you've got to be able to just hit them. You can't get bitter. Batman, Bruce Wayne, does not get bitter. You know, no matter what life throws at him, it's not about falling down. Everybody falls down. You will fall down over and over and over again. You got to be ready to get back up and to not kick yourself while you're down and to say, oh man, I screwed up. Fine, I screwed up. You know what? I'll probably screw up a dozen more times, but I'll get up. So that was my lesson from Batman, is that no matter what happens to you in your life, you have no excuse not to be your best and not to get over yourself. You know what I mean? To get over whatever's happened to you. I had a great experience. I moved back to New York I grew up in New York. Then I moved to LA and I lived there for about 15 years. And then I got tired of driving around in cars, so I moved back to New York. I love New York. I'm a New Yorker at heart. So I moved back and I borrowed a friend's truck to move some furniture from one place to another. He didn't tell me this truck was like 20 years old. So I'm on the Long Island Expressway, driving this truck, and I hear this grinding, and I think, oh my God. So I switched from third to second, and I was fine. I thought, okay, I've lost third gear. And then I'm hearing, I thought, oh, screw this. So I went down to first. I'm on the Long Island Expressway in first gear. I'm like going, and then I hear, well, luckily, as I was downshifting, I was changing from the fast lane to the middle lane to the first, just in case this was a disaster, which it turned out to be. So by the time I get over to the right lane, I'm on the shoulder and the transmission is shot. I have a truck full of stuff that I've moving from one place to another, and my dog. So what do you do? So there's a section of the Long Island Expressway where there are no exits for miles. So, and this was in like 2000, so it was before I had a cell phone. So I had to walk to the nearest gas station to get to a phone to call AAA. So I'm walking along the Long Island Expressway thinking, oh, screw this, how did this day happen like this? And I left my dog in the car, in the cab of the thing. And I'm walking as fast as I can, and I get to the payphone, I call AAA, I tell them where I am, I'm running back to get to the truck as fast as I can, and as I'm running back, I see the AAA truck going this way, past me. So I'm going like this, going, no, I'm back there. He goes around, comes around, he's coming back the other way. He pulls up to my truck, and I said, I'm back there. He backed up on the Long Island Expressway to get to my truck. And I'm watching this thinking, oh my God, I'm watching the end of the world. He gets to the front of the truck and he goes, oh, buddy, you didn't tell me you got rear-wheel drive. I said, I don't know what this truck has. I borrowed it from a friend. He said, well, I got to get around to the back and do the other way. I said, well, how are you going to do that? He said, watch. This is rush hour on the Long Island Expressway. He looks around, he looks around, he looks around. He does a U-turn into the space of traffic, gets around to the back of the truck, backs up to the front, to the back of my truck, goes back to back, hooks it up, and I said, now what are you going to do? He said, it gets even better, watch. He does a U-turn again with both trucks through 3 lanes of barely empty traffic. And you know the Long Island Expressway, I mean, if you've never been to Long Island, you can imagine, it's just like crazy during rush hour. And I'm like this, I'm thinking, no, this is a disaster. He does another U-turn around that way, and then he opens the door and he goes, jump in. I said, well, my dog is back in the truck. He said, bring the dog up in the cab. So the 3 of us are sitting in this. It's an unbelievable story. It gets, there's a reason I'm telling this story.
I'm waiting for the
No, it gets really good. I get in the truck. I said, man, you're not going to believe it. It's so ironic this would happen to me. I was born on Long Island, not probably 2 miles from here. And I'm moving back to New York, and this is where the truck breaks down. And the guy goes, 2 miles from here, what town? I said, Westbury. He said, oh, really? What school did you go to? I said, St. Bridget's. He said, I went to St. Bridget's. I said, oh, yeah, I was there a lot way before you. He said, well, what year? I told him. He said, who was your teacher? I said, Sister Josephine Marie. He said, I was in your class. We were in the same class in St. Bridget's School 40 years before. I said, that's unbelievable. He said, well, what happened to you? I said, well, I moved to LA, I'm just moving back. Blah, blah, blah. I said, what happened to you? He said, well, after St. Bridget's, I went to Chaminade. And I thought, wow, Chaminade, that's a Jesuit high school. That's a really hard high school to get into. I said, boy, that's a good school. You must be smart. He said, yeah, I got my BA at Georgetown. I said, Georgetown? I said, then what happened? He said, I went to, I can't remember where he said we went to for graduate school. I said, and then what happened? He said, how did I end up driving a pickup truck? I said, yes. He said, 2 years ago, I was worth over $2 million. I got wiped out on Wall Street. I was a day trader. I was in the dot-com bubble. I had lots of dot-com stocks. And I was margined, and the margins got called. I have a friend who owns a garage, and I'm lucky to have this job. I said, holy mackerel. I said, what a story. He said, yeah. He said, I really screwed up. I really had it all. I just made such a niche for myself, and I made all this money, and I had so much going for me, and I over-leveraged, and I didn't put anything aside, and now I'm screwed. He said, I'm totally screwed. It's all over. I said, wait a minute. I just watched a man do 2 U-turns in the Long Island Expressway in the middle of rush hour traffic. I said, you have balls of steel. He said, oh, no, that's just what I do. I said, don't tell me that. I said, I couldn't do that. I said, you did it once, you're going to do it again. I said, you figured out how to do it. He said, you're going to do it again. You're going to come back. He said, no, I blew it. I said, listen to me. I'm an actor. I fail over and over and over again. I never brag about it, but I fail a lot. I said, I get fired from jobs, I lose jobs. Every year I'm re-auditioning for something. I have no job security. I said, but I believe in myself, I get back on the horse and I do it again. I said, you just got screwed for the first time. I said, you're lucky it took that long. I said, this is going to happen over and over and over. I said, but look how far you got on your first try. I said, you've got it, you're going to do it again. He said, man, I am so lucky I met you today. I really needed to hear this. I said, wait a minute. The one who's lucky is the one who has the truck hooked up to the back of this truck. I said, I just saw you. I said, you saved my butt today. But isn't that an amazing story of 2 lives intersecting after like 30 years? And how he needed to hear what my life had been through, and I needed to have his talent and what he did. So I don't know, why did I tell that story?
It's a great story.
It's a good story, though. No, but it's about how you never know where life's going to take you. And that's, to me, the story of Batman and the story of Bruce Wayne. How you always have to be triumph. Never stop believing in yourself. Muhammad Ali passed last night. He never stopped believing himself. People thought he was obnoxious. People thought he was, when he didn't want to go to Vietnam, he paid a huge price for that. He had to give up his career. He was blackballed. He had to start all over again. But he believed in himself. And then 40 years later, we read that McNamara, the defense secretary, knew all along that it was a failed cause. And Muhammad Ali was right all along. And he ends up getting the Presidential Medal of Honor. Who would know that life would go like that? You know what I mean? And that, to me, is Bruce Wayne and Batman. Anyway.
Speaking of fortunate random occurrences, there are directors, we think of Spielberg, Lucas, that have this auteur arc And there's a director that you've worked with as Batman for a long time now, named Andrea Romano.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now, people say Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, and these guys are all great who you've worked with, but any opportunity I get to bring up Andrea's name, I love hearing you and other people who've worked with her talk about what she uniquely brings to the table.
Well, it's something that when I describe it to you, you're going to think, well, that's pretty obvious. But in fact, it's rare. She's someone who works with actors. She's the voice director. She actually guides us through the recording process. But she's someone who works with actors, who likes actors, and respects actors. And you'd be amazed how many people in the entertainment business that you run into who really don't like actors. They think they're spoiled, they think they're selfish, they think they're overpaid. They resent them almost. There's like an attitude. And a lot of people really just have a chip on their shoulder. Andrea knows how hard actors work. She knows how mercurial our lives are. She knows how poorly we're treated by a lot of the industry executives. And she loves actors. She loves good actors. She hires good actors. Because actors are like people. There are selfish ones, there are generous ones. There are good ones, there are crappy ones, let's face it. There are all kinds of actors. She goes for the generous ones. She knows the ones who will give to their fellow players, who will contribute. And so when you're in there with her, there's a level of trust that everyone has in her. You just know that she's on your side. Also, she studied as an actress when she was in college. And then she became a voice director. But so she knows how actors think. She knows how you have to approach a character. She doesn't say louder, faster, funnier. She says, go for it. You really want that guy. You really got to save that woman from that burning building. Okay, go. She'll give you a motivation so that you go, ah! To really, because you want something, you want emotion to be organic. It has to come from your soul. If you're just imitating someone else's line reading, 9 times out of 10 it'll sound like you're imitating. If they give you a line reading, it's usually the kiss of death, because it'll take forever for you to figure out how to not imitate them, how to make it your own. But if they give you motivation, you will come up organically with your own sound. So she always tries to give people the motivation. She knows that about actors. So that's the secret of Andrea. She loves actors, and she knows how to talk to actors. And as soon as people get in there, they know that about her. You can tell right away that you're dealing with someone who understands you. And so she just gets the best work out of people.
After the original animated series ended, you guys have gotten the band back together a number of times for different movies, and we've got a new movie coming out this summer, The Killing Joke. Some prima donna named Mark came out of retirement.
Mark Hamill's the most wonderful, wonderful man. He's such a great guy. The great thing about Mark is when you're with him, you become 10 years old again. He just has that quality. He's a little kid, and he loves animation, and he loves comic books, and he knows everything about comic books and animation. I mean, he's a maven. He's got an incredible collection of this stuff. Anything you want to know about any episode of any show, of any edition of any comic book, you ask Mark Hamill, and he knows it. He probably has a copy of it. So he brings that out in everyone else. You get in a booth with him, and you turn 10. And then it's fine. You're suddenly 10 again, and you're playing in the schoolyard. You know what I mean? Who doesn't want to do that? And we bring that out in each other. I've heard him say, I make him act better, and I definitely know that he makes me act better. So there's nothing better that you can ask for another person, that they make you a better person. And we do that for each other.
Working together again, is it just slipping back into old rhythms?
It was unbelievable, because it had been a couple of years, and we just went in the booth, and I mean, boom, like boom, it just happened. The voices were there, the characters were there. Bruce Timm just cracked up. He said, this is like we were recording yesterday. He said, this is just, nothing is different. And that's what you're going to love about The Killing Joke, by the way, is it is such a hearkening back to that original show. The artwork, the direction, the story, everything is beautiful.
of course, we can't get into specifics and spoilers and things like that you can't talk about, but one of the things that that people voiced concerns about, and that Bruce and other people have talked about in interviews, and you see even in the trailer, is that there's a more prominent role for Tara Strong's Batgirl.
Yes.
Was it fun getting to work with Tara again?
Oh yeah, and it's interesting because there's almost like it's almost a major subplot in this movie with Batgirl. It's a much more prominent storyline, which is great. It makes it a more complicated story.
You also got to work with a new Commissioner Gordon. You've worked with a number of commissioners, Gordon. What was Ray Wise in group recordings with you guys?
Yeah, he was terrific. He was there. Mark, unfortunately, wasn't because he was doing Star Wars.
Small independent pictures.
Little thing he's doing. But we always work together. We've always worked together. This time we didn't. But we know each other well enough so that we knew how each other would do it. We did in ADR, which is the last step of the process. By then he was back and we were working together again. But the initial record he wasn't. No, Ray Wise is terrific. Yeah, Bob Hastings, unfortunately, isn't with us anymore. But that happens over a 24-year span of a franchise.
Well, I want to turn this over and get some questions from you
Yes,
guys.
get some questions.
Kid questions are the best, especially when they look so excited to ask a question like this kid right here. Do you want to keep doing Batman? Are you done? Are you going to retire? Like
No! People ask me all the time, what other... People ask me, what other superhero would you like to voice? And I say, what other superhero would I want to voice? I mean, Batman is so cool because he's not an anti-hero, but he's a dark hero. He's got this incredible dark undercurrent that supports him and that motivates him, which is why he has the label of the Dark Knight. There's just a darkness about him. There's a sadness that envelops him. So for an actor, you're always looking for different colors to play. I feel Tim Daly's a great guy, but I feel bad for him every time I'm in a recording with him because Superman is so square-jawed. How do you find colors in that guy? He's just like, bright and sunny, it's Superman.
You guys you're getting a live Batman versus Superman.
But Batman he's so nuanced. There's so much going on. There's so much torture in him that he's so much fun to play. He's the most complicated of all the superheroes. So it's I will, as long as they ask me to do it, I will love to do it. The thing is, a lot of directors like to put their own mark on something, their own imprimatur. And so they think, oh, well, I'm going to recast everything and I'm going to approach it all new. And they don't come to me. But ironically, then they usually ask someone to do it and imitate me. So it's like, I think, well, why didn't they just hire me?
We're looking for a Kevin Conroy type.
Exactly.
Kevin Conroy's right over
Kevin
here.
Conroy's available.
Next question. Let's see. We've got a Harley right up here in the front.
In the animated series? Well, a Joker. I mean, because he's as complicated as Batman is. He's really screwed up, let's face it. Seriously screwed up. So he's a really complicated character. I love him. Mr. Freeze is a very complicated guy. I like the characters that are complicated and that you have to kind of dissect to get into. And Freeze is one of those guys.
That was early. That was early in the series
Yeah.
that Michael Ansara got to really completely remake that
Oh
character.
yeah, Michael Ansara was fantastic. Do you remember Sub-Zero? Yeah. Oh God, what a great movie. The opening sequence, I don't know if you remember, you're looking up through the ice of the North Pole and you see polar bear paws running on the ice. And that's the animation. And at first time I saw it, I thought, what am I looking at? And then I realized, I thought, oh, this is unbelievable. It's so beautiful. The artwork in that is gorgeous.
Next up, we got holding it with a gold-gloved hand there.
What do you think of Ben Affleck's contribution to the Batman mythos? Like, what are your feelings about that?
Oh boy.
Look,
Batman on Batman.
Yeah, Batman on Batman. It's my opinion doesn't mean anything about all the other actors who play Batman because I'm just one of the guys who plays Batman. But what I No, people are always asking my opinion of the live-action Batman, and the one thing I do think is interesting and that I really admire Warner Brothers for doing is having so many different people approach the role, because you get such different interpretations of them. You wouldn't think there were that many interpretations. Like, Mark Hamill's Joker, I thought was, and I still think is, the definitive Joker. Brilliant. Genius. And then I saw Heath Ledger, and I thought, oh my God, this is a whole different kind of crazy. You know? It was just as brilliant, but in another kind of twisted way. I wouldn't have thought anyone could do as well as Mark did, but he did, but in another kind of, you know, he went left and Mark went right or something. But it's that way with a lot of the live-action Batman, too. A lot of them have been good in different ways. I think Ben Affleck's is a wonderful actor. That's why he has the career he has. So I think he's contributed a lot. I think his performance is really wonderful in that film. I think if there's a problem to that film, it's just that they tried to put too much in it.
It kind of feels like they decided they were going to start trying to make about 6 different movies and didn't decide which one they were actually
Exactly.
making.
There are like 6 movies in it, and it goes all over the place. You're like, where am I going? You know. But the acting, I think, is terrific. It's just a lot of movie.
Well, as a little follow-up to that, the rumors are, you know, I'm not asking you to confirm things because you wouldn't know, but he's going to direct a new Batman movie and they're just going to throw a ton of villains in it. Is there a villain they haven't done in live action that you'd love to see them take a crack at, that you got to play with?
No, they've approached a lot of villains in live action. I can't think of any I haven't seen, but yes, I've heard that same story about him being approached to do a number of them. Should be interesting.
Right here in the front.
Hi.
I don't really have a question, I just wanted to say something. I've met a lot of my heroes throughout my life, and then it's true they say they're major heroes. There's one in particular that just like broke my heart. And I just wanted to say that I'm really thankful for you being who you are, because you always do such awesome things like the work you did with 9/11, and you're just out there always taking care of other people. Like, you are that person who is a hero on screen and off the screen. And I just want to say thank you for being that.
I really.
This gives me a great opportunity to ask you. I mean, it's not a story that you are a hero because you don't volunteer the real life hero stories. What was your involvement in the cleanup of 9/11?
Like many people in New York, I wanted to do something in the first few days after, and I went to they organized immediately a volunteer center, and it was in Javits Center, and I went down there, and they said, we've got all the people we need. I said, but don't you need diggers or tunnelers? They said, no, we've got everybody. But they gave me a number to call, and I called this number, and it was a restaurant that was about 2 blocks away from Ground Zero. And I called up and I heard all this restaurant noise in the background. And I said, hello? I said, I was given this number to call. He said, yeah, what do you want? I said, well, I was trying to volunteer. Well, do you have any restaurant experience? I said, I'm an actor. Of course I have restaurant experience. I said, do you need a waiter, a cook? Wait a minute, you cook? I said, yeah, I work as a cook. He said, and you're free? I said, I'm free. Yeah, he said, I mean, like tonight? I said, yeah, I'm free for a couple of weeks now. I'm between things right now. Can you get here by 7 for the dinner shift? I said, well, yeah, I guess. Get down here now. We need everyone we can help. So I went down to a place called Nico's, which was in Lower Manhattan. It was just a couple of blocks. And they had taken over this massive Italian family eatery, bigger than this space, and taken over the kitchen. And it was just a steady stream of relief workers coming in all night from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. I did the night shift, and you fed them. And this kitchen was just a assembly line of food. Food was being brought down in trucks from midtown and uptown restaurants, raw food. We were preparing it in the kitchen. They had all these cooks from different restaurants, lots of volunteers waiting tables, and just firemen and EMS and cops would come in covered in the dust. The whole area was lit up by strobe lights those like work lights, because all of the energy in Lower Manhattan was out. And there was this thick sulfurous haze in the air all over that area, and it was the dust and the sulfur and the death that you could smell in the air. And there was just and it was a dark, it was a very hot September. It was very muggy, and the nights would stay hot. And we'd go out in between, taking breaks, and there was a card table we set up on the street outside, and we'd be sitting out there trying to cool off from the hot kitchen. And one night, some guy came up on the street, and he started screaming, "You don't know! You don't know! You don't know!" And he was throwing things at us from across the street. And there were all these huge cops who we'd been feeding, and they came running outside and they surrounded us. And he's throwing these, "You don't know what I've been through!" And we thought he was a crazy person. And I thought, and then they went up, they started closing in on this guy, and I thought, I'm watching suicide by cop. They're going to have to shoot this guy because he's throwing things at us, and he's out of his mind. He's uncontrollable. And they slowly circled him, and I saw that they were talking to him, and they were talking to him, and they talked him down, and they talked him down, and they got closer to him. And then one of the cops put his hands over his shoulder and walked him away down the street and patted him on the back, and he left. And he came back to me, and I said, "That was unbelievable." I said, "How did you talk that guy down? I was sure I was going to have to see you use your gun or something." He said, "Well, thank God we didn't. His son was in one of the towers. He was a busboy at Windows on the World." And that's the kind of stuff that was going on in New York that week, in those weeks. You didn't know who you were dealing with. You didn't know how close it was to someone. And the cops were in this position of handling this incredible emergency. They still hadn't dug through the rubbles or anything. And yet, not going too far. I mean, there was a real temptation to do something drastic with this guy. He was throwing things at us. And they didn't. So and the subways, all the subway stops were set up as shrines. There were candles in all of them with pictures of the missing. Have you seen? Have you seen? Have you seen? Times Square was just like a church underneath with all these pictures with candles. Have you seen? You thought, you knew all of those people were never going to be found, but people were still looking. It was also, God, I get emotional, sorry.
Thank you for telling me.
It was also a time of great community, a great sense of community in New York. It became a really big, small town where people watched out for each other. So it was a wild period.
You doing things like that and coming and talking to people and spending the time that I see you spend with people at your table, no matter how many times, when they send me the list of, hey, here are the people to do Q&As with. Every single time, top of my list. Let's hear it for Kevin Conroy one more time. Who really wants it, well, that guy stood up, so he gets it next.
So obviously you're iconic here. Everyone recognized you as the Batman, myself included. Did you know when you first started, that this was going to be, something that suited you so well in the future for as long as
No! I didn't have a clue! That's what's so incredible about that John Lennon line. Life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. I had no idea this was going to happen. I went into that audition. Look, the first animated character I auditioned for, I walked in, I met Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, Andrea Romano, and the producer Alan Burnett. This is like the gold team for animation. But they were all
Fab Four.
What's the Fab Four? But they were all just starting out. They were all in their 20s. I mean, we didn't know this was going to become an iconic group of people. And I went in, the only Batman I knew was Adam West's Batman. And I said, well, I know Adam West. And they said, well, no, he's incredible, but that's not the way we're going. I said, that's pop art. That's, we're going dark, noir, the Legends of the Dark, the real dark stuff from the 30s. I said, wait, I don't understand. So Bruce Timm had to walk me through it. And I just used my imagination on this spur-of-the-moment audition to throw myself into the situation, which is why I told that story about my childhood growing up. It's just everything that happens to you in life feeds into what you do as an actor. So I was just pulling on that all that personal experience, and it put me in this very dark place for this character. And when they heard the sound I was coming up with, they went, "You got it," you know. They'd seen hundreds of actors for the role. But then again, we only knew we were going to do that one series. And each time you get ordered, you get ordered for 22 episodes, another 22 episodes, another 22. This thing just kept going for a few years. And then it turned into The Adventures of Batman and Robin, and then that turned into Batman Beyond, and then that turned into the Justice League. I mean, it just kept growing as they were looking for new iterations of the character. And then the Arkham chapter came into being. So it's one of those things where you look back and you think, wow, 24 years, what a body of work. But as it's happening, you're going one step at a time. One step at a time. That's what life is. It's a series of one steps. And then you look back and you think, wow, I ran a marathon. But when I was doing it, I was just doing one step at a time. It's interesting. When I first opened in New York, this is what it's like, by the way, to be in a panel with Mark Hamill. You cannot get a word in edgewise. He goes, "Oh, and that reminds me." And you go out of that panel not having said a word. When I first opened in New York, I was doing a production of King Lear in my Shakespearean days for John Houseman, who was a legendary film director, theater director. I was playing Edgar, Mad Tom. Edgar was arguably one of the hardest roles in the play because he starts out as a prince, he's wronged, and he has to conceal himself in the image of a homeless beggar throughout the entire play. And he maintains that image while he's taking care of his blind father and watching the whole kingdom be destroyed around him and trying to help people along the way. It's a really interesting character. I worked so hard on this role. My New York theater opening, the New York papers described me as a crab twitching on hot sand. I was devastated. Well, think about it. I'd been supporting myself since I was like 17. I'd been living on a scholarship. I'd been living hand to mouth. I'd been working in mailrooms and restaurants. This was my chance. I didn't have anything else to fall back on. And this is the reception I get. And I thought, oh, good Lord, what am I going to do? I was just feeling so sorry for myself, sitting in this dressing room on Broadway in the dark, and everyone else had gone. All the rest of the cast had gone. They'd gone on to parties and stuff, and I was sitting there feeling incredibly sorry for myself. We'd all stayed up late at the theater till the reviews came out. And I heard this voice from the doorway. "There comes a moment in every man's life." It was John Houseman. "When he has to put one foot in front of the other. I suspect you've arrived at such a moment. My advice to you is to get out of here and get on with living. Enjoy yourself." It was such a wonderful piece of advice. There are times you just have to put one foot in front of the other, no matter how beat up you feel, and just get walking. And you'll end up somewhere. And that's the way I feel like my whole career's been. Just walking, just one step, one step, one step, one step, and you look back and you go, whoa, I've done 24 years of Batman. That was my John Houseman story.
We've got time for one more. It's got to be good.
Oh, we got a lot.
Because if it's not good,
Oh, I'll be here for hours.
this whole room, way in the back.
Wait till I sing out my
This
little.
guy's like doing jumping jacks.
Who?
All right,
Way back.
so I know that voice was the thing that kind of made me want to go from just kind of doing voices for fun and stuff to really actually doing like voice acting, not like professionally or anything, but just get better and better about it. But I'm finding that there are not a lot of resources out there. So what advice, what resources would you have for someone who wants to go from just kind of doing funny voices to getting better and better at that?
I think the thing about voice acting that is misunderstood is that people think it's making funny voices or just making character voices. You got to remember, it's about embodying a character. It's really bringing a character to life. And the way you learn that is by acting. So I always tell people wanting into voice acting, the most important thing to remember about voice acting is it's acting. So theater groups, local groups, any kind of acting chops you can develop are going to help your voice acting ability. And then you really should work with someone like Andrea Romano does it, I know, in LA. There may be someone in Dallas who does it, because this is a pretty big city, who gives voice acting seminars. Because I did it when I was starting. Once I started working, I thought, I got to figure out what it is I'm doing. So I worked with a voice acting coach for a few months, just to kind of, there's just muscles you want to develop. But the big thing to remember is it's acting. And you can't skip the stage of learning how to create characters. When I was at Juilliard, I was in an amazing class that had people like Robin Williams and Kelsey Grammer and Francis Conroy. Christopher Reeve was there at the same time, but he was actually...
You almost ended up being roommates with Superman.
Well, no, actually, I did live with Robin for 2 years.
Oh, no, as Superman, I meant
But
Chris.
well, we almost did, but we didn't.
Yeah.
We almost shared an apartment, but
That would have been a sitcom.
he was a lot richer. He was a lot richer than I was. I couldn't afford his rent. But who knew that those people were going to end up being who they were? We were all just, broke students.
Mork and Batman.
Yeah, Mork and Batman. But to watch, I only bring that up because there was something called French mask class. And it's classical training with masks. And there's a full face mask of the 4 stages of man: youth, adolescence, middle age, and old. And then there's half masks where you use the voice. So they start you on full face, so you have to use pantomime to create the character. So you create the body of the character. And you create little scenarios. And then you graduate to half mask, where you then are creating a voice for the character. And to watch Robin Williams create characters in this mask class was so humbling, because up until that moment I thought, well, we're all sort of on a similar level. We all got into Juilliard, Then you watch Robin become an 80-year-old man or a 50-year-old woman. I mean, he would become these characters with these different voices, and you thought, holy mackerel. But what he was doing was becoming the characters. You know what I mean? It wasn't just doing a voice. It's about acting. So I would say, take acting classes. And then get with a coach who teaches voice work, because there are certain tricks to it.
And if you're in North Texas, there are people who do that, actually. Chris Sabat has a studio called Okratron, and there's a guy named Chris Rager, also a Dragon Ball Z guy, who's been doing a series of voice workshops. You should look into those. They just started doing them. Now,
Any more?
We've got one. I'm gonna get one more question before we do. A couple pieces of housekeeping. We got to get Kevin to something real quick right afterwards, so we'll get a big round of applause. Everybody will stand up, but if we can get him out, just because the traffic pattern's a little bit difficult, please be conscious of that. I would be remiss if I didn't call on Robin back there.
Robin, I've been looking for you. Where the hell have you been?
Go for it.
Hit it, Robin.
Do you prefer to do series, like television series, or doing movies?
Doing what?
The animated series or the animated movies, which one did you like better?
The series and the movies are very, very similar. The way you create them in terms of the voice work is very, very similar. It's just a question of how much time you have for each. With movies, you have a little more time because they have bigger budgets. But in terms of approaching the character, and playing the character, it's almost identical. What's interesting though, it's an interesting question, is doing the games. That's a whole different world. Because Arkham Knight had literally, I'm not exaggerating, I'm not being an actor, 37,000 lines of dialogue to record.
And you're here alive today.
And I'm still alive. It took 2 years to record, which is why they did Arkham Origins, was a little like placeholder they put out in between the trilogy because they knew this was taking so long, they didn't want to lose the audience. So, and that's why they used a whole different group of actors for that. So Arkham Knight, you're in a booth, and because of the way games are built, depending on how it's played, it goes in different ways. You know, there's all these different variables. Well, there are thousands of different lines, but there are also, every take has to be completely clean. So they don't like to get the actors in the booth together. So you're alone. You don't get the energy from the other actors. You don't get the energy from it. You're in a soundproof booth, which is, if you've ever been in one, it's like dead air. There's no air in them. You start sweating. And you're alone. You've got to completely generate your own energy. You've got to make the lines believable. And you've got to keep the Batman voice sincere, you know, stay in that voice. And then you've got to do it, okay, give it to us, we want it really angry. Great, that's great. Keep the anger. Now can you have a little bit of sarcasm in it? Okay, 3 takes of that. Okay, keep the anger and the sarcasm and give us a little smile, just a little smile. Okay, let's do 3 takes of that. Okay, keep the anger and the sarcasm and the smile, they're perfect. And just give it a dagger. Just give it a dagger. Okay, we'll do 3 takes. I'm not kidding. That goes on hour after hour after hour. It's so different than acting with Mark Hamill where you're 10 years old. You know what I mean? It couldn't be more different. But it's challenging in a different way. It's challenging all your resources to stay in character, to keep it alive, to keep it fresh, to make every take believable, and to keep going by the 8th hour of the day. And so that's why they only do you on week blocks. They'll do it for a week, and then you're off for a month or a couple of weeks. Then they'll bring you in for another week because they know you're just burnt. So the difference between those and the TV shows or the films is night and day. But the result is so incredible. Those Arkham games are unbelievable. I mean, when you see it, you're so proud to have been a part of it. But the process of getting there is kind of like going to the dentist.
So Kevin is going to be back at this table today. You're also
Yeah, I'm on my way back.
So I, again, host a podcast called Electric Shadow. You'll hear an edited version of this in that feed. If you like voice actors, there's a lot of that kind of stuff in there. But enough about me. Let's hear it for Kevin. Let's get it.